Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free.
Hello, Otterites. This is episode 160.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
Gentlemen, this is Robert sitting in the captain's chair doing an episode that I have been looking forward to for a very long time, because this is our heroes. And we're doing this here today in Studio N on the 30th floor of the Nakatomi Tower. Was it behind the waterfall?
Well,
just down the
yes, down the hall from Ellis, behind the waterfall.
Behind the waterfall, yeah.
Very good, yes.
So, and today we're doing what is unbelievably so, Francis said at the end of the last episode, our very first female Our Heroes. But didn't some female come up in one of the others? It seemed like I was listening to one, which granted would have been from a year ago, because I'm always about a year behind on all my podcasts. I thought somebody came up. But, you know, maybe not necessarily as the primary, but I have to go back and see what I listened to. Anyways, it's Lucille Ball. Somebody who I think is the greatest comedian ever to grace a stage or television or movie screen.
You could make that claim, and no one would argue with that.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest there ever was.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, women comedians, women comedic actors are generally compared to Lucy.
Yes.
They're not really compared to
and often
anyone else. Even
often found wanting, too.
Yeah, I mean, even greats like Mary Tyler Moore are generally, not the comparison. Everybody compares to Lucy.
She is the iconic mold. She is the gold standard of female comedians, because she's somebody who held her own with the men in the shows that she was on, and she was the star of the shows. She was the first female lead on any of these kind of shows. And we're talking early 50s when this happened. That's unheard of. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's called I Love Lucy for a reason. She was the main character.
Right.
And that's astounding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say she didn't have help, of course.
Oh, no, because it was ensemble cast.
Right.
It definitely was, but she's the star.
Oh, very much so. And she went through an enormous amount of grief just to get the thing made. Because there were, as you alluded to, there were powerful forces that, what do you mean a woman in charge? What do you mean you're going to have input into the creativity? What do you mean your husband is Cuban and you want him on the air?
With an accent.
With an accent, yeah. She faced that, very much so. Now, Desi was a brilliant businessman all on his own, who brought a lot of things to the table. And if you watch some of those episodes, which I did recently, Vita Benjamin, I had to rewatch.
Oh my God, yes,
it's
still one of the greatest. There's a part after that which I didn't remember, because you always see the clip of her doing the Vita Benjamin thing when she gets snot faced, 51% alcohol, but they have Ricky come out and sing. Yes. Well, that seems odd today, but yet that was part of the format then, because it's not just the comedy, but it soon became just the comedy, because I was looking, I forget where it was, but that's like a first season episode. Well, that would change over time. I mean, Lucy came of age in people's homes. I mean, she had a child on air.
Yes.
She gets pregnant in the show, and then all of a sudden they have
from their twin beds somehow.
That's right. Absolutely, yeah. And they bring in little Ricky, who was not her son. Of course, it was an actor.
Right. He was too old to be their son.
Because
by the time he got. Because he grew very quickly on the show.
Very much so. And, of course, their first child was Lucy Artemis.
Yes.
Who was a daughter. And their son, actually, Desi Jr., didn't come until much later.
Well, Lucy was born in 51. Desi was born in 53. They're very close together.
Right, but it was after. But
little
Ricky was on the show.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So, the show would have been contemporary with then. So, she was probably pregnant with Ricky. Desi. But anyways, let's talk about her, because she's not the genius just because of I Love Lucy. That's what everybody knows her for.
Which is only the first of many.
But I mean, that was a really neat point of it. Originally, the hook of the show was, well, there's Lucy, and then there's this cool nightclub act of this exotic Cuban singer. But you're right; over time they de-emphasized.
They played to their strength. I mean, the show lasted 9 seasons.
Yeah, so it became more this wacky comedy with Vivian Vance and
William Frawley.
And
William
Frawley,
Frawley.
who they didn't really want, actually. They came later that Lucy didn't really want him in there, ironically enough. And he grew on them, and it turned because he was very...
Well, he's a stodgy old grumpy kind of guy.
He was very professional and did a very good job on that. And I know
he and Vivian Vance came from vaudeville. So, it's a very similar, but still very different kind of thing. It's very much a variety kind of thing, as opposed to doing what is essentially a play every week.
Yeah, in front of and I'm glad you mentioned Vivian Vance, because in many respects, Lucy was at her best when her and Vivian were together.
When they were doing, it's not. It shouldn't be called the Thelma and Louise syndrome. It's the Lucy and Vivian.
Lucy and Ethel.
Lucy and Ethel, yes.
Right, yeah, that's right. But it was,
but
they together encaptured so much of the better scenes. Those were Lucy and Ricky were great, and the whole four of them together. But that's what I think, in my opinion, that's what brought, because the Lucy show, which came after that, was the two of them.
Yes,
yeah. The home stuff was great, but it really soared when it was Ethel
these
and
two
Lucy
girls
trying to get out from under. Ricky
trying to do stuff and getting into crazy situations.
Yeah.
They were the first buddy pair on television.
Yeah.
They weren't first ever, because obviously you've got Abbott and Costello and things like that. But they were certainly the first female pair, because that's still a rare thing.
Yeah.
And it's the first one that people saw on television, which is interesting as well. So let's talk about her early life a little. Let's kind of set the stage.
Yeah.
So she was born in 1911 on August 6th, which is the same birth date as my brother, which I found was did not know that. And from New York, English background, English, a little bit Irish, Scotch,
Oh yeah.
kind of a background.
very much.
Obviously, I mean, look at that red hair. That's natural red hair, fellas.
And they would play up the kind of the Irish thing with the Lucille McGillicuddy.
Yes, exactly. Yes, they did.
McGillicuddy is here.
Yes.
Remember that? I love that one.
So
we can say it all the time.
Her dad was a line worker for Bell Telephone. And at the time, of course, her mom stayed home. Was a housewife. And they moved around a lot, spent time in Montana. They were in Michigan when her father died, when she was just 3 years old. Interesting thing, I don't know that she has fear of birds. So apparently she never saw Hitchcock. But the only thing she remembers from the day they had at her dad's funeral was that a bird got loose in the house. And apparently that is the source of her fear of birds. Her ornithophobia.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ornithophobia.
Yes. So, she had lifelong fear of birds. But, so they moved around a lot. But after her dad died, they ended up going back to New York, and her mom's parents, her maternal grandparents, helped raise her. And so, very early, she got into modeling at the age of 18. So as soon as she was of legal age. And, of course, very quickly from there, she was getting bit roles on stage and, then into movies.
Yeah, and modeling's kind of in its infancy.
Yes.
Really, because you're just beginning to get the understanding of, hey, I can use pretty women to sell stuff.
Exactly.
Advertising is just taking off.
Well, you're just now getting the ability to reproduce on a mass scale pictures.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything, all other ads prior, to the early 1900s would have been drawn. They would have been woodcuts or things like that. They didn't have a good ability to print photographs, so that helps there. She was in films in the 30s. You see her in Three Stooges, and those. She's just one of those background girls, chorus girls, stuff like that. Bit parts that a lot of young actresses went through because they had a lot of them. So girls funneled through those constantly, but she stayed. And then she got a contract with RKO Radio Pictures, and she was, lead in a lot of B movies, supporting role in A-list movies, and she got her name out there. And she was a good actress. I've seen a lot of these because I love the old black and whites. Love them to death. And she was a good actress. She could do serious drama work, even though it was the comedy that she was known for. And ultimately, the I Love Lucy show is put on by Lucy and Desi. They have to form their own production company to ultimately get this thing produced, and then still have to fight to get it on the air.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just even getting it produced. They had to come up with their own company. So they were successful enough or had enough backers they could, which again, that's a risk for those backers. They had to talk those guys into it.
It's very pioneering.
Yes, it is living their dreams, as we said in the last episode.
Going off into this idea of, well, you know what? These guys don't control everything. We'll make our own production company.
Which was a huge risk.
Yeah.
Well, it was because you're still in the middle of the studio system. The studio system had not yet been broken.
Yeah.
And, the fact that they could do this, that she had enough star power, or at least enough gumption.
Enough vision.
Yeah.
To pull it off.
Most people would have been paralyzed by fear at even the thought of it, but not her.
Right.
And that's one of those things we talked about, risk and reward in the last episode. This is a classic example of, you achieve not because you risk not. That she got it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, they took a chance and, they formed their own company, which is responsible for some of the most iconic shows in TV history.
What would become Desilu Productions is
Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible and Star Trek are just two of the shows that...
Obviously, Star Trek is the largest of the franchises. Desilu eventually became part of CBS, Paramount, and so on. But which is fine, that kind of stuff happens. Mm-hmm. But it was their production, and she was the first female head of a real studio, and so she's groundbreaking.
She kept control over after divorcing Desi Arnaz.
Yes, right. And she divorced him in '60, married Gary Morton in '61, was with him the rest of her life. But once she had the Lucy character, after I Love Lucy was off the air. Not long after they started the
Lucy Show.
The Lucy Show, and then not long after that went off the air. Here's Lucy,
which was early 70s.
74.
Yeah, I was going to say early 70s.
And her kids were on that one.
Yeah,
because they were old enough to be.
Yeah, so this would have been contemporaneous with stuff like the Brady Bunch and some other.
Yes, because these are in color. After the I Love Lucy.
Here's Lucy. That's kind of the one I remember more a little bit is Here's Lucy.
Yeah, that's the one where they had the animated her in the
in
the beginning
credits.
and the end of the credits. Also, that was the third iteration. But the Lucy Show was really, throughout the '60s, a lot of it was black and white, but a lot of it was color. Her and Vivian Vance and Gail Gordon, I was going to say, who is a fantastically underrated comic genius.
Yes,
he really was.
He was the perfect foil for Lucy.
And it was amazing some of the stuff they did. She has episodes with Richard Taylor and Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Man, don't do that to Richard Burton. Don't do that to Dick. Don't do it. But and some of these other folks that are top level talent, doing television.
Well,
with her.
even on I Love Lucy, they had that. When they went out to California for those several years, because Ricky got a movie contract on the show. And so they moved from New York, and of course, Fred and Ethel go with them.
Yep.
And they meet all these movie stars.
John Wayne was on there.
John Wayne, Charles Boyer,
and George Reeves.
As
Superman.
Groucho and Harpo Marx.
That's right.
Oh my God! That's one of the best episodes. Is where Lucy dresses up as Harpo Marx and they mirror each other.
That's correct. It's one of the
most... my gosh, that's genius stuff.
It's fantastic how they get away with that.
I forgot, but they move out of the apartment in New York and they move into a place in California.
Yeah, and then when they come back east, they move to a place in the country. Again, all four of them. But that was the interesting thing. They changed it up because they changed the apartment once on the show. The original one didn't have any windows. Then the second one had a window. Even though the layout was exactly the same, there's a window on the back wall. And they managed to keep the whole thing fresh because they kept just the creative genius of all this, which they all had a great hand in.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Ultimately, that show succeeds or fails based on the writing.
Yes.
And that's where they really shone because they had that comedic, not just Lucy, but mostly Lucy. They all did. They were very, very good at that. And Desi Arnaz was pretty. He's underrated in history in many respects, I think, for just how talented he really was.
Yes,
some of that's almost a racial bias, I do believe, because
a bit, yeah.
Because during soon after that, see, Cuba is really seen as this exotic wonderland that everybody loves in the 50s. And next thing you know, we hate them with Castro. So all of a sudden, Desi's Cuban heritage, which was exotic and cool in the 50s,
is not so much.
It's not so much, and that's not fair to him because he was a brilliant man, and I know he was successful after that. If you see some of his later interviews and stuff, I mean, he's just a hoot. He really was,
Yeah.
and he was a brilliant man. And it's unfortunate that the two of them had their issues, and they did.
Because they did some movies as well, and they did one as newlyweds, and just they were still playing Desi and Lucy from I Love Lucy. I mean, they're the same kind of characters.
They had an amazing
ditzy,
chemistry with each other, and some of that was the dominating personalities that they were.
He could stand up to her. Is the thing, because her personality was so big.
Yeah,
and even in the movies that she had made prior to this, where she's really not much more than a bit player, supporting actress for the bigger movies. And the B movies are not necessarily great movies, but she does a great job with them.
Yeah.
But she doesn't. While she's solid, and she has a great presence. She doesn't have that presence she has until she gets to I Love Lucy,
because she can do it her way.
Yeah,
and that's key.
I mean, for people our age, the stuff. We have such iconic memories. Things like the Vita Vita Vegemin,
the candy line.
The candy line. That's what I was trying to do. The candy line.
Yeah, that keeps going faster.
When they're in Italy stomping the grapes.
Oh, I love. Yeah, absolutely. The two of them. It's
there's just so many things.
And it kind of gave rise to the whole concept of situation comedy.
Yes,
they invented it in many ways.
Yeah, they were because a lot of stuff before this. Because again, we're talking early 50s. TV has just started as a real thing, as a real serious thing, and a lot of it is variety shows.
Yeah.
Or shows where you'll have some famous actor come on for, like Ronald Reagan for GE, and they'll have some mini drama for an hour. And it's a different cast every week.
Playhouse with Barry Nelson playing James Bond.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, because they were still figuring it out. They're still trying to do radio on television. And being the comedic genius that she was, she, I think, understood the visual aspect of television.
She did, very much
earlier than many.
Yes.
Because she was one of the best physical actresses ever.
Yes.
She knew how to be expressive, do things with her body, to be funny.
Without it really being slapstick.
Without it being slapstick.
But
yes.
just,
I think there was an element of that every once in a while, but it was not.
Yeah, I mean, she was a real master at the idea of using your body as a tool in the acting.
Right. It's not just telling jokes. It is truly a whole experience.
The situation, because everything was
built
around
and the body movement.
Creating a circumstance.
Her facial expressions.
Yeah, I mean, she can make you laugh by just raising her eyebrows.
Well, no, everybody knows that. That was a cliche that she did because it was just her thing. Yeah. Of course, everybody also knows you got some splaining to do, Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy, you got some splaining to do.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was.
She was a model for so many to come after. One of the things that struck me, and it really crystallized why I loved Lucy so much as a kid growing up. So I saw an interview with John Ritter, the late John Ritter, and he was greatly influenced by Lucille Ball. And if you think about his style of comedy, you can see how she influenced him. And he said one of the greatest things ever for him was when she appeared on Three's Company.
That's right, because in many respects, he began his rise just as she was leaving the stage.
Yeah.
And he had learned from this and taken what she gave and moved it forward for a new generation.
Yeah. And so she influenced him greatly in his style of comedy. And once you see it, it's like, oh, yeah, that's obvious. But, I think the trail that she blazed as a woman is probably more important even than the comedic influence.
Yeah.
Because I think she opened a lot of doors. I think she opened a lot of eyes, as well as opened a lot of doors.
Not just in the talent, but also in the business end.
Right.
Because, again, they were some of the first ones doing some of the stuff that became standard in television production and making deals to finance that with the TV networks.
Right.
And made money and then were able to invest that money into things that kept that stuff going. Again, not just a talent, but a business visionary in the entertainment business.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's just an incredible, and obviously that's her and Desi, but after they divorce and it's mainly her, she's still driving, still having successes.
Yeah, very much so.
So, she can stand and very much did on her own. So let's take a bourbon break here. I know we're a little early into the show, but I think this is a good point for a bourbon break here. So I am drinking. I got some of the wild turkey again. So Francis decided he wanted that. I said, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea."
Yeah, that's what I'm drinking too. Yeah, and I'm having it with ice per your recommendation. So we'll see just how. I didn't check the proof on this. We should have. I want to say it's 90 proof.
Yes, I believe regular wild turkey is 90 proof.
The chill does make a difference in many ways.
Yes.
I like that. I like that chill. I had two cubes in it. I knew it would water it down a little bit, but it moderates the bite. That's for sure. It does. It does moderate.
It does help smooth it out. It really does.
Yeah,
because
I know
it lets the flavor come
yeah.
out,
Right.
while at the same time, I think moderating the bite in some of them. Not all of them, but this is one where I think it definitely enhances.
I know it's got pear in it. I'm wanting to taste it, and I'm trying to taste it, and I can't find it, but that's okay because it's got several things to it.
But we're just slugging down a Coca-Cola.
I understand.
So I mean, that sugar on your palate's going to really mask.
I know, ruined your palate, Jean-Luc. Thank you, Robert, but that's okay. We can continue to move on.
So I poured a glass of Evan Williams. I picked up a quick bottle. Now Evan Williams is $14.
Yeah, that's right.
So I mean that's kind of your just that one jump above.
It's the Scotsman's bourbon.
Yeah, of ancient age. It's just that jump above Ancient Age and Kentucky Tavern. But at $14,
which is the very bottom.
Yeah, I mean that's the stuff you could drink it or you could spray it underneath the toilet rim. Same difference.
Yeah. But that's stuff you put out for your drunken brother-in-laws.
Yeah, perhaps.
I think
can't go that low. They notice. They notice that.
They might pick up on Ancient Age.
Well, after they had a few of the good ones, then you put that one out.
That's right.
But for $14, Evan Williams is good stuff. And again, it's
that
very local.
That low end, it should not be underestimated for some quality there. Evan Williams is a good example of that.
Even if Very Old Barton is a decent bourbon.
Very Old Barton is a fine quality bourbon.
And it's a $15 bottle.
Old Granddad, they're all right on that same level there. J.W. Dance, another one that I'm going to be picking up here not too long ago because, ironically, the brand it came from the Dant family. My grandfather worked there in the 40s, so yeah, I think I should have a bottle of that.
So now you've been having this with the ginger ale.
Yes.
So talk about that. You don't have it here now, but now...
Oh, well, I just decided to just kind of, well, maybe I will try a little bit of a mixed drink instead of just having bourbon. So that's, picked up the bottle of Evan Williams as a mixer. And, every once in a while, again, listeners, we don't drink a ton when we're not together.
Right.
True.
But every once in a while in the evenings, I've had a bourbon and ginger, and using Evan Williams for that. But on its own, even without that, that's got a good flavor to it. Mm-hmm. That's got a good flavor to it. Again, a little bit of kind of a caramel to it, a little bit of a licorice to it, not as much as the Green River, and not quite as much sweetness as Wild Turkey, but it'd be a good place to start if you're unfamiliar with bourbon. And you don't want to invest a ton. Start with Evan Williams at 14. Work your way to Wild Turkey at about 20.
Right. Or the basic Four Roses.
4 Roses. Then branch out a little bit.
Try the single barrels of the small batches.
Elijah Craig, Larceny. When you get to about 25 to 28, get right in there.
Yeah.
And then really branch out if you
once you get
then go over $30 for stuff.
Yeah, once you get into the 20s, you really need to stop mixing.
Yeah,
because generally, especially the ones we've talked about, you do not want to do anything. So, Mark, I had to read it off for people on Derby Day. So, can you repeat off the top of your head, because we just had Derby last week.
Yes.
From when we are recording this. Your mint julep recipe.
My mint julep recipe. Okay. So Martin's mint julep recipe is, of course, you make your simple syrup, which is just, sugar and water. You boil it.
Right.
And make your simple syrup. You take your mint leaves, nice fresh mint leaves, and you muddle those, but you do it gently.
Right.
Because you're just breaking them up a little bit to let a little bit of that essence of that mint come out.
The oils.
Those oils. Then you're going to mix that simple syrup and your mint leaves, and you're going to let that sit. Then the next day, you take that nasty shit and pour it down the sink. And go get a bottle of good bourbon, pour yourself some, and have a drink.
Exactly.
I was expecting that, yes. I was waiting for the shoe to drop. I know you too well, Martin. It's just, there's no way he's doing all this.
I'm not drinking real mint julep.
Well, almost nobody from Kentucky really drinks mint juleps. That's the stuff we sell to the rubes that come in from the Derby.
Yeah, so all you tourists that come in from the Derby and you're spending $15 on those mint juleps at the track.
Or more.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that they do it to a bourbon like Woodford Reserve is just disgusting to me. Because that's,
That's a full body shiver right there.
Exactly.
Just drink the Woodford. It's good shit.
Right. I mean, yeah, when I came across that, I had seen it before, but several weeks ago, came across it in your feed somehow, it came back up, or maybe it was one of the memories. I don't know.
No, I usually post it every year.
Well, the one I found was from 2018.
Yeah.
And so I had to read that off for everybody because that was just the greatest thing.
Yeah.
Because that's just...
Pour that nasty shit down the sink.
That's right, because you just don't want to do that. If you're gonna make a mint julep, you might as well use the ancient age.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's right.
So, all right. Anyways, when we talk about Lucille Ball, so there's a lot of unique characteristics about Lucille Ball. First of all, especially if you look at the younger ones where she's trying to be more glamorous, like in the Chorus Girl shows, movies and what have you, it's more evident there. Because by the time she gets to be in I Love Lucy, she's presented as a housewife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not a whole lot of glamour there. But, she's also, by the time she gets to be there, she's almost 40 years old by the time they start I Love Lucy. Because she was born in 1911.
Yeah.
So she's 39, she's 40 when she has her first child.
Yeah.
So at that point, maybe she either doesn't want to play the glamour girl or doesn't feel like she should or whatever. But she was a very beautiful woman, and we lose sight of that when we see I Love Lucy as opposed to the earlier movies, and they're in black and white, so you lose a little bit of that as well. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that red hair was very prominent and very natural. And of course, you know me, I love my redheads.
Amen, brother. Testify.
So she had a lot of things going for her. I mean, she was very beautiful. She could act and do all the things that.
She was actually trained as an actor. I mean, she took classes and trained as an actor.
She was not just somebody who just walked into the studio and just started spouting lines.
Yeah, and her modeling background also taught her again that idea of how to use your body to make a visual impact.
Right. So she had all of these things that you call it a perfect storm of looks and ability, and more importantly, dedication. One of the things that I love about her, and it shows because it comes off as so effortless. And when it comes off as so effortless, that's when you know they've put the work in.
Yeah.
Her dedication to her craft.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the best at what she did. And that's one of the things I really love the most. I mean, she's just so entertaining to begin with, but she was just so good at all those things that she did. She worked at it. And that's one of the most admirable things, because she could have gotten by on without doing that. Probably the thing that held her back from having more leading roles was being a redhead, though, because 30s and 40s was the era of the blondes in Hollywood.
Yeah,
that's true.
Very much.
Yep. Remember, I think there was a movie or something she did where she had dyed her hair blonde, and it just looked wrong. It looked totally wrong for her. But because you're used to seeing the red hair.
Yeah.
What's interesting, what I find interesting, are the when you see it in actresses who have come after her, some of the same style, and whether they know it or not, they're replicating some of her style. Deborah Messing, I think, is probably the closest female follow-on to Lucille Ball. She was, of course, in
Will and Grace.
Will and Grace, yes. Both versions. And she also had a show where she was a police officer who was divorced from her husband, who was her captain.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really interesting because in that character, I thought Deborah Messing was more like Lucille Ball than any other show she had done. There's a little bit of that manic stuff that Lucy could do so well as serious to comedic. And I was disappointed that Deborah Messing did not get the role to be Lucille Ball in the Netflix.
Nicole Kidman got that.
Yeah, Nicole Kidman got that.
Javier Bardem.
I have not seen that yet. I wanted to do it before we did this episode, but I just did not get the opportunity.
It is really good. It is really good. It talks about the tempestuousness of their relationship.
Yes.
Which in many respects, we hear the term lightning in a bottle. That's kind of what we had here, is that especially at that critical time, I mean, they are at each other's throats, and they're in each other's beds, because apparently both of them, and this is well documented, so I'm not talking outside of school, apparently their sex drives for both of them were off the charts. Charts.
Desi was for sure a horn dog.
He was not faithful, whereas she was, we're not real sure, but mostly yes, but she sometimes...
Mostly? That's kind of like being a little bit pregnant.
Well... See, there's ambiguities there. We don't really know.
Kiss
and Desi was well documented.
Tongue.
Everybody knew what was going on with him, and that's one of the things that led to their divorce.
Well, at the time, for a woman to be unfaithful is very difficult because it was much more dangerous.
That's why it's not what there was on that is not really well known.
She would have been blackballed for sure.
Oh yes, well, not just dangerous, because a man, he fathers a child back then. Well, it's not mine. A woman gets pregnant. It's hard to say. It's not mine.
Yeah,
so it makes cheating for women a lot more dangerous,
especially in the 50s, because morality issues, morality clauses were still very much a thing for that. So that was, of course, they were married to each other, and they recognized they needed each other in many ways. They could not work together the success of that show was tied together. By the time they get into it and it becomes a hit, they're at each other's hip. They made it work, though, and although Lucy eventually got to the point where some of this was the Cuban machismo, masculine myth that he bought into at the time, this hypermasculinity, that it was tolerated, and Lucy's kind of at the point, I'm not going to tolerate this.
Well, yeah, and I think if you look at not just her life, because she grew up without a father. Now, granted, she had her grandparents, but grandparents are different than your parents.
That's right.
And so I think she had a sense early on of independence. I mean, going out and getting a job as a model when you're 18, and essentially being out on your own at that point, that shows a lot of independence. If you look at a lot of the roles that she took in those early movies, she's never a damsel.
No, she's always an independent woman.
She was street smart. She was wisecracking. She was not somebody to be contended with in those. And maybe that hurt her ability to be an A-list actress because she wasn't blonde, she wasn't demure enough because she was playing strong roles.
Yeah, and in those days you didn't do that. There were very few because even strong actresses that played strong roles, they were Jean Arthur is a great example. I love her. Yeah,
she's in Gosh, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Not Topper. Oh, she might have been in that. But she and her husband are...
The Thin Man.
The Thin Man. Thank you.
That was Myrna Loy.
Oh, you're right. That's Myrna Loy.
No,
yes.
Sorry.
That's another great example.
William Powell and Myrna Loy.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yes.
William Powell.
William Powell. That's the one.
Yeah. Katherine Hepburn is a good example of somebody that could play the strong woman. But they were few and far between because most time female roles in those days, that's love interest. That's all you're there for.
Exactly.
That's all you're there for, and it's rare. I mean, they would give them some identity, perhaps, but ultimately, from a story perspective,
yeah. I mean, look at Jean Harlow. She was she's a gorgeous woman, but she got the bubble-headed blonde kind of role.
That's right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, she died far too young. She was a very good actress.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were many out there. Lana Turner.
Yes.
Had some very decent roles and some very.
Which was the actress that helped develop Radar? She was a genius.
You're going to ask me that now.
Hedy Lamarr.
That's Headley.
That's
Headley.
Yes.
Hey, it's 1890. You could sue her.
That's right.
Yeah. So she's one. It's another one of those that strong women, and she had some strong. But again, even she had to be a little more. You want to call it subservient? You can, because the roles back then, the women were subservient to the men. Now they may have been in the comedic roles, somewhat akin to the roles you see today, where the women make fun of the men, but not nearly to the degree. It was more good natured, and the man was still their protector and those kinds of things. They did it more for the comedy as opposed to we're just going to treat men like crap, like you seem to see today. But she didn't do those kind of things. She was always her own woman. Even when she was a studio actress, it seemed like every role she played, and maybe that's just because when she'd audition for roles,
that's what they let her have.
That it's like, oh, you're really good at that. We'll let you do that. But until she got her own production company, it hampered her ability to be a movie star.
Turns out she didn't need to be, because she turns out to be more famous of a name than almost every other name that you made.
Yes.
You could ask people today who many of those are. Oh, weren't they in Hollywood? Would you say Lucille Ball? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love Lucy. They're going to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, that show completely dominated 50s television.
Yes, it did.
I mean, we've talked about other 50s shows.
Right, we've talked about the Honeymooners.
I would say Jackie Gleason deserves a lot of credit.
That's a big deal. Milton Berle's a big deal. But Lucy and Desi dominated television in the 50s.
Yes.
It is the blueprint by which family comedies basically still work.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yes, she created it. Her and
I
Desi.
would mention, Ivar upstairs is a huge fan of Everybody Loves Raymond.
Oh, yeah.
And watches that all the time. And when you watch that, you start looking, it's like, you know what? Brad Garrett, terrific comedic actor.
Yes, he is.
But Patricia Richardson also. And Doris Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
And those parts don't exist without Lucy in I Love Lucy.
Right.
That is the standard.
Right. I mean, you make the argument that Raymond's parents are Fred and Ethel.
Yeah, you absolutely could.
They kind of take on those roles.
Yeah. And when you watch these family sitcoms, to a large degree, the wife characters are
Lucy.
Are Lucy.
Yeah, well, and to some degree or another, because not all of them, especially nowadays, will portray the wives as that kind of screwball, because that's not really, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
the guy can be that way, but but we don't do the women that way. The women are less. In a way, I just think they're less creative. I think they're less real in that sense, and because everybody does something a little zany every once in a while. If you don't, gosh, you're not going to be on television anyways. But you're right though. She paved the way for them to actually be characters as opposed to window dressing.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's really the best way to look at it. She paved the way for women on TV shows to not be window dressing. Now a lot of them still were, but they always would have been until somebody else like Lucy came along. So.
Yeah, because you got actresses like Katie Sagal who Married with Children.
Oh, that's another one.
That's another one that broke a lot of ground around that time, because she took just as much of the role as Ed O'Neill did.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a very it was
even though it was much cruder. That's probably closer to I Love Lucy than any other show.
It's turned on its side in many respects, and it's brought forward into a totally different set of sensibilities.
Yes.
But in many respects, that was kind of the point.
Right.
Was to take a good comedy that what you had to do in the 50s. Those constraints are not there anymore, especially on a fourth network. Let's take something. Let's do something really different, and that's it broke a lot of ground with that. And I forget how long that lasted, but it was a very, very long time.
That was several years. It was a good run.
Oh yeah, Married with Children is the show that made Fox.
Absolutely.
I mean,
The Simpsons eventually.
Yeah, The Simpsons. I mean, it's what gives Fox viability as we can produce live action shows, real shows that are just as good as and as successful as the other three networks.
Right. Now, and critics panned it for the crudeness, but it was a well-loved show.
Everybody watched it.
Yeah.
Everybody watched it. It was one of those things that, we can do this. Oh, I like this.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of sexual innuendo and what have you, but, honestly, it was relatively mild compared to some of the stuff you see.
Yeah, it was...
it was just more obvious about it. But the actual innuendos were not as, certainly way better than a lot of rap music and comedians that I've seen.
That came shortly after that.
Yeah. So, you know, the influence is mightily, or it's, I don't know that you can underestimate how much she influenced television and the role of women.
Right. And not just what you see on the screen, again, what goes on behind the scenes as well. There's a quick note that, again, Desilu, very successful. She sold her shares of Desilu to Gulf Western, and it would eventually become Paramount. Right. You know, today is Paramount. She sold for $17 million. That's today's equivalent of $130 million.
Wow.
That's business sense, man.
Yes.
That's business sense.
Yeah. And that's on top of whatever money she made while she ran.
Years. That's right.
Yeah. So that's knowing she's got something of value that she came up with, she and Desi, that was different from other people, and like, boom, here, you know, if you want it, you're going to pay.
Yeah. The concept of an independent production company was, when she was doing it, was what? And then,
because again, the studio's controlled everything. So essentially, what she's doing is creating a new studio.
That's right.
Yeah,
and which eventually
networks controlled it all on television.
That's right. And from that, now they're everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, it's nothing to see a Warner Brothers produce a television show that goes on a Paramount network. You know, because often the studios that are owned by the networks don't produce stuff for their own network for whatever reason.
Yeah,
it goes anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of, well, let's make a deal, let's make an agreement to make a buck, and we'll get this on.
Right. Yeah, because you know, if the network has an interest in a studio, and you know, say, well, we don't really have room on the network for that. Yeah, go ahead and put it on that other one because we'll still make money. You know,
get it on the streaming platform.
Yeah, well, especially nowadays. Yeah,
get it out there, and we'll make a buck. And
well, you know, in essence,
she's that business person that's throwing these possibilities out there.
Desilu is the model for all of these streaming services, if you think about it, because they're all independent studios now. Netflix, Hulu, Apple.
Yep,
they're all producing their own original content, and it's good.
That's right. Yeah, because they're outside the constraints. They're willing to be able to think differently, and you know, there's innovation for you, and that's what the public demands. That, in fact, no streaming service would exist without their original content now.
Right.
Whereas when this first started, it was all about, well, we want to take this content that's already out there. No, now it's all about, what have you done for me lately? You know, it's those, and some of them. Netflix comes out with these Christmas movies every year that are very low budget, like the Sci-Fi Channel used to do in the 90s. Every weekend it was Sci-Fi Weekend, where you just had these B movies that they're making, but they were great.
They're good fun.
Fun, exactly. You're not investing a lot in it, both in time
and you're not expecting Oscar-worthy performances.
It's always meant to be fresh. That's where you get Sharknado. Which kind of become a little bit of a cliche, but people watch the heck out of it.
But it became a cultural phenomenon.
That's right, and it was just one of tons of other of that type of stuff, because you can do this stuff if you're willing to take a little risk, and put some money behind it, and let the creative people be creative. See, that was one of the problems, I think, with the studio system and the network system for so long, is they overthought so much and said, no, we can't do that.
Yes, the network censors and the studio censors.
That's correct.
Really killed a lot of creativity.
And then everything had to be a certain format.
That's correct. Yes. It's got to be cookie cutter, and people are smarter than that.
Well, to a certain degree, the cookie cutter approach to some things is not a bad thing.
Well, I mean,
I do not mind episodic TV where you have a reset, because that's usually a sitcom for the most part, and I'm okay with that because. That's kind of entertainment from that I like. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is the latest Star Trek series that has just started with Anson Mount as Captain Pike. Anson Mount is a phenomenal actor, by the way.
Yes, he is.
Phenomenal actor.
Yes.
And they're making a big deal like it's... So, in a way, I kind of scoff at this because they're making a big deal about, we're returning to episodic, like this is such a great thing. Well, no, it's just a different approach, because honestly, I prefer long-form storytelling on my television shows, because otherwise it's not binge-worthy. That's why you binge. But on the other hand, I also appreciate these one-off episodes because it's all part of this larger tapestry. So for Trek, I think it works.
Yeah.
Not every show can work that way. But we're still seeing a story. It's just not quite. It's not a same theme running all season.
Yeah, and you can have through threads, and they will with characters.
Yes.
When you got the same characters, you're going to have some of that. In fact, you better, because characters is what often sells these shows. But you can't. You don't. It doesn't have to be something where everything is one long form. That was one of the studios and the network's objectives. Is we have new people tuning in. They'll be lost. They won't come back. Experience has shown no, it doesn't work that way, especially in the streaming area.
Well, yeah, nowadays streaming and DVR, that's no longer true.
We either want it,
you may have to wait,
or we don't.
New people, the danger is some new people won't start until the end of a season when it hits streaming.
Yeah,
and so that first season, studio execs have to wait. All right, did we not get enough viewers because they caught on in the middle and they were waiting to watch it at the end?
Yeah,
or did the show really suck? And I don't know if you guys have seen, but a lot of shows have moved from networks to the streaming platforms because the networks are saying, no, this is not worth it. But the streaming platforms are saying, yeah, it is, because we've seen how many people are watching the episodes that are running
end. Yeah,
right. And the streamers are getting smarter too, because they have you got your your income side where you pay for your membership. They've also got your ad supported versions.
Yes.
Outside of that, that's brilliant, because that way you're going to get your revenue. You don't have to sign on for that, but if you put up enough good content, they will.
Right. People don't mind the ads. I mean, obviously, I'd much rather watch a show without ads, but they don't mind it as long as the ads are not too often and too long.
And
that's the problem with network television, because shows at best are 1 hour, and we're approaching 40 minutes max of content.
Yeah, it's ratcheted down over the last. It was 46, 42, 40.
Yeah. So we're going to get to the point where it's half of it is commercials.
Well, yeah, with the original Star Trek, in this, it was
51 minutes.
That's right. And now, whereas Star Trek Enterprise was 42.
Right.
Because it wasn't a major network, but it was still network.
Right, but they all followed that same format, though.
That's right.
Every 1 hour show had the same number of commercials.
That's right. That's just in 20 years. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's streaming. I don't mind commercials too much, as long as they're not too long and too often. But also they also made it where it's just a couple dollars more if you want to get rid of the.
That's right. Yeah,
the ads.
They're very smart with regards to that, and they recognize that thanks to Lucy, they realize television is content that people want. If you create good content, people will follow you and will seek it out.
Yeah.
Or come after you.
I think they knew that. I think the lesson from Lucy and Desilu and I Love Lucy is, one, it's worth taking a risk if you got something that you believe in. You may fail, because they could have, but they came along at the right time with the right product with the right sensibilities. And plus they had the genius on screen. But also, the lesson is you don't have to be constrained by somebody else's vision. And that's where, even if they don't realize they're taking it from the Lucy experience, ultimately that's, they were the first ones to really break out of that mold. And that's something that I think is it's a great lesson for anybody.
Yeah.
Don't let somebody else define the limits of your own dream, of your own life. Because it kind of goes hand in hand with the, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So, Facebook is free. Yeah, that's because you're the product. Because they're selling your data. It's just the way that is. So, it's hand in hand with, if you let people do this, again, talked about this kind of stuff before, it's handing over your agency. You're letting people run your lives when you don't have to, or at least aspects of your life. And I just think that's a great model. They willing to take risks, and they were good at it.
Yeah. And they believed in what they had too.
Right.
You can't minimize the presence of talent. It wasn't just desire; it was talent. It had to be.
I mean, think about how talented she had to be to have 3 successful versions of the same show.
Yeah.
Now they tried a 4th in the '80s, but by then the concept was done.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, plus she was much older. and at her age at that point, because she would have been in her late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, she was seen as a grandma in that one here.
Yes,
and
it's just not the same.
No, it just didn't. It didn't work quite that way.
So yeah, it only lasted 3 months. But again, 3 successful and a 4th attempt at essentially playing the same character across 4 decades. Mm-hmm. I admire that. That's worth admiring. It's not that she milked it; it's just that she was that good.
Well, yeah, because obviously, you can't continue it if nobody's watching it.
Exactly.
People automatically demand that, and that's a very important thing.
Yes. Well, yeah, we have pummeled the expired equine sufficiently.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, but I think you really covered it. I mean, a very worthy hero, a visionary talent, and a visionary business person.
Yeah.
That has combined to be a cornerstone of the entertainment business
And American culture.
Yeah. They're just it's hard to point at anyone who's more foundational and more bedrock to what entertainment and what our national psyche is in the U.S. than Lucille Ball.
I mean, you could probably find people, but they didn't do all the stuff she did.
Right.
Again, they're behind the scenes people or in front of the camera.
Yeah, I mean, Milton Berle, even Ron Berry. There are a lot of people.
Well, even some of the movie directors.
Lucy's at the core of it.
Yeah. What's the guy that did all the westerns?
John Ford.
John Ford. He's part of that foundation of how you make movies.
Yeah.
But most people don't know his name because he's behind the camera. And as you said, she's in front of and behind. She's a great creative talent as well as a great businesswoman.
What television is a big part of.
Yes,
a lot of people. Again, Jackie Gleason, Milton Berle, tons of people, but it's Lucy is at the center of all of this.
Yes, you can look at Lucy and think, oh, well, that's the same as this comedy over here.
Yeah.
Not quite so much. I mean, a little bit with the Honeymooners.
Yeah.
But the format was a little different. I mean, essentially the same, but not quite.
There are other family comedies. There's Danny Thomas and stuff like,
But they didn't have the legs.
Nelsons, Ozzie and Harry. I mean, but Lucy's really...
Yeah, they did not have the legs.
People still watch these today. I mean, you can find these on all your streaming platforms, so you don't have to. People will still call this one up regularly.
Yeah.
For 4 generations later, you can have little kids watching this and still get it and still be entertained by it.
Oh yeah,
exactly. It's universal humor.
I Love Lucy was still in syndication. I think even into the 70s.
Oh, later than that.
People really were watching it even then.
Yeah, I think it was even in syndication into the 80s.
It was, definitely. I remember Channel 41 here locally
20 and 30 years later
would show it regularly.
Yeah, and once you get past the 70s, because 60s you're still used to having some black and white. 70s is the first decade where it's all color. By the time you get to the 80s, nobody wants to see any black and white anymore.
Right.
But that's one that still got shown.
They still got shown. That's right. Yeah. Exactly. You didn't want to go back to that, but you
still
see some. But you're right.
Very worthy. Very worthy. Well done, Lucy.
Yes. So, Francis,
we're going to continue the theme of comedy next time, folks. We talked about comedy a lot with Lucy here today, but we're going to pop culture's next, and we're going to go to one of the quintessentially most beloved television shows of all time. And we're not talking I Love Lucy, of course, it's one of them, but this is another one from a slightly different era, from the 70s through the early 80s. Everybody remembers where they were.
Oddly enough, it's about the decade Lucy was in.
That's right, about the 50s. Oddly enough, everyone remembers who was around at that time, remembers where they were when MASH, when the final episode aired. It was one of the highest rated scripted television shows at the time, of all.
It might still be.
And it might still be. It was a phenomenon at the time. And we remember, we grew up through all that, through that era. And some of it is the best television still. It also holds up. We're going to go deep into that and talk about why the heck we like it, why it was so good, and why you should be interested in it. So, join us.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.